How frustrating is it when you are trying to look at something and watch something and see effects or transitions on the screen and it's just very, very stuttery. The playback is very stuttery. So let's look at this example here. I've got a transition from the bridge to the house, and I've got, two pieces of footage, and I want this to use this pop wobble transition effect. And when I click the play button,
This surviving home, built way back in 1846. It started off as footage for a Scottish settler, but over the...
It's as stuttery as everything, and it's really hard to watch and to decide what that's actually going to look like. What we need to understand here, or what we need to do, is to build what's called a render cache. Now, a render cache, when this is actually playing, what's happening at the moment is my computer is actually using as much memory as it possibly can to play that footage back. What a render cache does, it actually is just a collection of files, so that when the computer's playhead comes up to this area here, it in fact doesn't play from the timeline, it just goes and grabs the files that's pre-rendered out that are in the render cache. So instead of using the memory, it's actually using files that it's laid down on the hard drive to play that bit of footage. It makes it so much easier. Now, there was an quite easy way of forcing a timeline to create its own render cache in Premiere Pro. I can't remember exactly how I did it, but it was relatively easy to do it. You put a couple of ticks in boxes and away it went and it did it. And if you remember, I don't know if you ever used Premiere Pro, I'm pretty sure it had a line across the top and it used to go green or something when it had got a really fully generated render cache for the piece of footage underneath. And I did some research to try and find out exactly how you could achieve the same thing in DaVinci Resolve, and this is what I came up with. So the first thing to do is to just go up to Playback, Render Cache, and use User. Not Smart, not None, but User. Okay. If you've got None, it just won't create it. If you've got Smart, it decides what it creates, and it sometimes doesn't make the best job of that. If you've got User, you can decide, or you can determine, what footage actually gets created in the render cache. So let's put that on User. The second thing is, now you see now we've got a red line along the top there, and we've got some blue starting to appear. And what that's doing now is it's actually writing those files in the background for me. So when I come to play this in any second, where are we? Let's hit the play button.
This
You'll notice
home, built way back in 1846. It started off as a simple cottage.
That it's looking pretty good. Where it's blue, it's looking pretty good because that's where it's created those render cache files for me. But it's still got a little bit at the end
built way back in 1846. It started off as a simple cottage.
That hasn't properly, it's still kind of working on it. Now, what we then need to do then, or there's a couple of things to do to make sure that we are creating that render cache for everything that we're playing. So if I click on these two clips and right click them and go to Render Cache Fusion Output and switch that on, that means that that will be created for those two clips. So now we're telling the system that we want it to go into the background when it's not busy and create render cache files for those two clips. Now, the way that you then get it to do it for an exact little segment that you want, and this is a little trick as well, is if you go up here, right, and you see that we've got something there that says show all video frames. Now that is not normally switched on, it's actually switched off like so. And what that means is that often the narrative gets ahead of the footage. So it will just play the audio files and the audio files for a particular clip, but it doesn't necessarily show you all the video frames. So the audio can quite easily get ahead of the video. If we switch that on, so it says show all video frames, then what happens is when you play back, it actually forces the player to play every individual frame. And when it's playing the frames, it creates the files in the background for me. So let's just let it go through that and watch what happens when it comes now to this piece here where it doesn't have any files created. So it'll bump up against that red part there, and you'll notice that now it's forcing those files to be created as it's actually playing, because the blue keeps catching up with it. So let's do it in another little context here. Let's just move ahead a little bit and put it here. Say I'm going to mark an in point and an out point. And let's say that I want that to be fully rendered. I want the files to be fully rendered for that part. I've got an in and an out point created. I've got this little loop thing here. I'm going to switch that on. And now when I press the play button, it's only going to play that particular piece of footage. Now you notice it's not actually doing anything here. It's not creating those files for me by the looks of things. And I suspect that's because these clips haven't had that option switched on to create that render cache. Notice though also that it's only playing that little bit over and over again. So let's just go and have a look at these. Whoops, it's performing a backup. Yep, see it's auto, so it's not working. Let's switch that one on, and let's switch this one on, and let's switch this one on. So we're taking it from auto to on. I'm just going to hit the play button now, and it will stutter its way through these files. It'll go back to the beginning, and if I just leave it like this, eventually it will build all the render cache files in the background. As you can see it's doing here, it's going from blue to red as it moves through, and eventually it will play perfectly stutter free.